Hello, and welcome to the Open Copilot Association webinar series on generative AI and industry. Today is the first episode in our series where we will discuss the impact of generative AI on OEM servitization for industrial sites. This is a pre-recorded panel discussion that will be followed by a live Q&A. Please write any questions that you have in the chat and they will be addressed during the live portion of this event. The Open Copilot Association, or the OCA, brings together everyone involved in the full life cycle of industrial equipment. This includes equipment OEMs, industrial sites, service organizations, technology partners, industry groups, experts, and end users. Together, we are uniting to create an open standard for AI copilots to improve interoperability between suppliers and make them all accessible on a single marketplace. As AI copilots are enhancing the efficiency, usability, and reliability in a wide variety of operations and manufacturing applications, the OCA strives to empower industrial organizations to harness the transformative power of this new technology. Our mission is to build a unified Copilot marketplace, standardize AI Copilot best practices, leverage Copilot technology to tackle shared challenges, and foster collaboration to drive conversations about AI Copilots. We believe that AI Copilots are a catalyst that will shape the future of industry. As technology evolves rapidly, we are committed to keeping our audience informed about the latest advancements, tools, and strategies shaping the use of AI copilots. Now, without further ado, let me introduce Mark Homer, Managing Director at Field Service Associates, who is our moderator and who will now introduce the panelists and topic. Mark?
Hello and welcome. My name is Mark Homer, and I'm delighted to host the first episode of the Open Copilot Association webinar series. This is a broadcast recording with live Q&A. Industrial sites rely on the complex equipment from hundreds of different suppliers. As the workforce ages, these sites need supplier support more than ever to operate, maintain, and repair essential equipment. AI copilots deliver this support. In recent years, we've seen an increasing number of equipment manufacturers offering servitized contracts, sometimes referred to as outcome-based or advanced service contracts. In this forthcoming discussion, I'm keen to explore how manufacturers are leveraging generative AI and AI copilots and examine the impact and the effects of Gen AI on servitization. I'm excited to hit the ground running with my esteemed expert panel, who I'd like to introduce you to now. Introduce you to Mr. Jan van Veen, who's the founder and managing director of More Momentum. Professor Dr. Sean West, Institute of Innovation and Technology, Lucerne School of Engineering and Architecture, Lucerne University of Applied Sciences and Arts. Mr. Chris Oldland, Managing Director, 1927 Media Limited. Mr. Dale Calder, CEO and founder of InSkill. Yeah, would you like to say a little bit about yourself and your company?
Yeah, thank you for having me here. So I've been working with B2B manufacturers for about 20 years to work with them to accelerate their service transformations. And as such, raised More Momentum a couple of years ago, which is now evolving into a service transformation institute, making sure that service leaders and their teams have the knowledge, know-how, and insights to drive in a good pace in the service transformation, which is just becoming increasingly interesting domain to be in.
Excellent, thanks, Jan. And Sean?
Thanks. I spent 25 years building up service businesses. As an owner-operator, we started to sell services, and then moved across to a non-OEM, build up services, and then with GE, understood how some of the OEMs did it, and then after a few years left, and then build up another service business where we went to 5x on the service side, which was great, and we did that whilst maintaining the margin. After that, I decided to leave to go to university to teach some of the things I'd learned, kind of the same things that Jan had done, but I decided to go to universities to do it. So that's what I do now, and I've done that for the last 10 years or so in Lucerne. Thanks.
Fantastic. Chris?
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, so I'm the managing director of a company called 1927 Media. We were born out of a desire to combine technology and service in terms of the talk, the kind of conversations we're having now. Spent a lot of time following people like Sean and Jan around, actually, and learning as much as I can. Way back in the midst of the time, I was actually a quality services manager for one of the largest hospitality organisations. I've got an understanding of where service came into the flow, and always been a very passionate technologist. Recently, as 1927 has evolved, as you can imagine, in the media space, I have had a lot more hands-on experience with actually getting my hands dirty with software. So I'm not as much as a software engineer now, and got my head very much around the Gen AI piece, which is going to reshape both the industry I serve in terms of manufacturing, but also the industry I operate in terms of publishing.
Superb. Thanks, Chris. And Dale?
Hi, Dale Calder, CEO and one of the founders here at InSkill. I guess you could call me a serial entrepreneur. I've been in the industrial space my entire career, and I've kind of made a specialty of creating businesses at the leading edge, sometimes bleeding edge, of major trends in industry. And I was one of the pioneers in the IoT space. I actually am a technologist. I hold over 10 patents and kind of doing this type of activity. And, InSkill is our latest company focused in on bringing Gen AI into the industrial sector.
Fantastic. Thanks, Dale. What I thought would be useful is just to clear up a couple of terms that we might be using. So, Dale, I'm going to pick on you just to ask you to clear these up. So how would you describe a copilot? What's your definition of a copilot? Nice and short, please.
It's pretty simple. You'll hear terms like Gen AI, AI copilot, now AI agents are all the rage, LLMs, a whole bunch of words around this. But the taxonomy is pretty straightforward. A copilot is kind of designed to work with a person. So a person uses an AI copilot. When something's done autonomously, and that could be via the copilot or kind of through another mechanism, we call that an AI agent. They're basically sisters to each other, same basic technology. Those technologies use LLMs, which are large language models, and think of that as an AI brain that we can use generically in lots of different ways. And when the LLM generates output, we call that generative AI. It's generating output. So that gives you, I think, a reasonable definition to kind of start the conversation with.
Superb. So an AI copilot is the humans in the loop, and AI agent is doing it for you.
Correct.
Fair enough. Okay. Right then. So let's start perhaps in the present day situation. What are manufacturers doing today to support their customers, turning their technical expertise, their knowledge into sort of a scalable revenue generating service? Perhaps to kick off that, Jan, would you like to give us your thoughts? What are you seeing from your community of manufacturers?
Yeah, so in general, I think if you talk about providing the service, it's already something that's around there all the time. Is you provide expertise, you provide hands-on capacity on site, and there are different models from remote on site, do it for yourself, supporting that, do it yourself, or do it for me, or in between. And that's now just being accelerating by digital tools. So customers are digitalizing the way they work, they manage their assets, to run their operations. So service providers are on the same kind of journey. So what we see is that the service that we're already providing is that performance levels go up in terms of response time, being more predictive and proactive, but also reducing the cost levels of that through automation, and Gen AI is accelerating that path as well. But on the same hand, we also see already a long time that we're also looking for, hey, but we can probably do more for customers. We can expand the scope of our services, not just looking at better product availability or product performance or how products are used, but also how can we help them to improve their operations. So let's call them operation performance solutions. or maybe even looking at how can we streamline the whole ecosystem with different players in there. And even those are becoming more digital as well. And then AI or generative AI is in that same mix, that we have new opportunities to become more valuable, reduce the cost of that, but also serve other needs of customers. Because if they are looking at digitalization and using Gen AI, for sure that will change the kind of capabilities they need to develop. That for sure will change the kind of needs they have, and who's going to serve them in them. Are those going to be the OEM manufacturers, or are those going to be third-party system solution providers, or are those going to be kind of system integrators or platform services? And there we see an interesting shift in competitive landscape, is that it can be OEM manufacturers, but it can also be digital native new entrants into the industry. So yeah, it's in all different directions. We have to reduce cost. We have to improve the performance of this kind of service you already give, but you can also significantly increase the scope of our kind of services. In a nutshell.
Absolutely. Sean, I mean, you run a very large community, smart manufacturing community. What are you hearing? What are you seeing in the real world today?
In the real world, I actually had a conversation over that today from an OEM and said some of the startups are killing us on some of this stuff. They're really good at doing it. And I think that's some legacy systems in place. I think that's also some legacy thinking in place. We've done it this way for the last 20 years or 40 years. Why the hell do we need to change? And I even see this at the university of why do we need to have access to ChatGTP and the other tools? Well, it's actually quite good at what it does. I'll be honest, for a literature review, for certain aspects, it's better than I am. And it's important to understand how to use these tools and when to use these tools. But then if we move into delivery phases, what's the costs? Do I know what the costs are? Can I go through all the past quotes I've got and understand really what the cost level should be? Can I do that on the pricing level of that? What skills do I need to bring in? Oh my goodness, so-and-so's on holiday. How do I replace that person? This also then changes the value proposition that we got to the customer. So internal efficiency, external stuff. And then when we look at our installed base, I think I can begin to work out which ones to target with new technology. And it supports me almost like a chess game machine that says you could do that move or that move. And that's the consequences of doing that or the other. So I think there's a lot of areas. The issue I have really is the promise is up here at the moment. And I saw this with digitalization, it will do everything for you. Reality is somewhere a bit lower. I still think it's a bit higher than there, but it's not in the sky. All of this, though, comes back to it's really a knowledge management tool in my mind, and it supports decision making. And that's what I find really interesting. Is how do we capture a lot of the tacit knowledge and play it back?
Chris, you've written a lot about sort of skill fade, sort of, not training enough apprentices, the industrial setting. And you've also done a lot of work on servitization. I mean, what's your sort of take? What are manufacturers doing currently?
Yeah, I mean, just to build a little bit on what Sean was saying, in terms of the comparisons to digitalization, digitalization, and then digital transformation. AI is effectively just the next continuation of that. Dale, really interested in that. You did some great work at the spearhead of IoT and industrial IoT, because Gen AI is the next obvious piece of this. We've now got petabytes, zettabytes, etc. of data where we've got rich insights, but no human's smart enough, or quite frankly, doesn't have enough time to be able to pull that insight out. And that's where I think that we're going to start seeing something very special with AI. I think I've just completed, which is not published yet, a study into pricing and manufacturing, where I spoke to around 130 executive leaders in the pricing field within B2B manufacturing. Gen AI was not particularly hugely implemented. I think we have, as an industry, across multiple different pockets of the operations and the different business silos and different business functions. We have to have a clearer understanding of where we're utilizing Gen AI and where we're using predictive AI. So, field service is a great example. In scheduling, we've been using Darwinian heuristics for forever. We just didn't call it AI, but that effectively is predictive AI. Gen AI for me is going to give us the interface, like we've kind of touched on. It's going to give us the interface that does solve a massive problem. Mark, a few years back, you were with us in Birmingham when we were talking about this. 3-4 years ago. And we were talking then about I think right a couple of years ago then, I said, look, I hate to be the guy that got it right. But 10 years ago, I was saying that we're going to have an aging workforce crisis, and now we do. So we need to start thinking how we evolve.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
Absolutely. For me, the third-party workforce is the way forwards, blended workforces, and to achieve that, but while still delivering the levels of service standards, especially in industrial, where there's massive health and safety and huge costs of downtime, we need to be able to transmit knowledge. As Sean said, it's a knowledge management system, and be able to dial that knowledge in the right place. Yeah. And I think Gen AI sits right alongside where remote workforce solutions do in there. And I see it as one big part of the same complete rethinking of how we move knowledge around. And I think there's a lot that we can go into there, but that's a top line summary.
Let me bring in Dale. So he's got the advantage of quite a few thousand, I think about over 4,500 factories are actually using the InScale technology. So a lot of practitioners. And again, it's quite a journey, isn't it, Dale? It's sort of how this value proposition has evolved and how manufacturers are using this sort of technology. So again, would you like to sort of share what sort of the highlights, I guess?
Yeah, if I look at it, it's really about expertise, and I think you kind of said it right, transmit knowledge and dial it into the right place, right? Get it to the person or worker that needs to access it, but at the right level for that particular worker, no matter where they are in kind of the food chain. And so, in my career, I've basically, spent my time shortening time and distance. So everything I've done can be categorized down to that, and all the value propositions have driven off of that. The first company I built was around OLE for process control, digitization of machinery and commonality of that. And that was just to enable somebody 25 feet away to do something better. The second one was using the internet to stretch that out across the globe. And then we connected two companies. So we connected, at the company that I built, a company called Exita, we connected over 300 machine makers and industrial OEMs to their worldwide customer bases using the internet. Again, shortening time and distance, no more planes, not having to send boots on the ground, solving a problem far away, all that stuff. The next evolution was to flip that upside down or flip that backwards. And instead of transmitting kind of just data to an expert far, far away, transmit the essence of that expert to the places where they're needed. And as you said, shape them. And so that's really what Gen AI is enabling. This concept of a portable generic brain that can, mine the expertise of these expert providers that may be outside the facility to bring that expertise of that provider in the form of an always-on app, in Gen AI. It really transforms everything. And so to me, the whole thing around this is, we're opening up use cases now. They start with traditional troubleshooting, something's broken, the building's on fire. Let's, douse it out, right? So when something's not working, you have a real motivation. So, troubleshooting and repair. But ultimately, everything that you do in a facility requires knowledge and expertise, and everything you work on requires knowledge and expertise. And there's always someone that knows more. Yeah. And, as we said, as these, workers are retiring and leaving, they're taking with them 35, 40 years sometimes of, domain knowledge, out of that one place. And how do you replace that? The only way is to syndicate it. And so, that's why, we're really keen on the technology. We think that it is going to have a big, big impact on everything industrial. And the only way that it will really deliver value is if it can syndicate that expertise over distance and shorten time. And so that's really what the OCA is about, to do that in a secure and standard way. So, that's how we see it playing through.
We all know that there is an aging workforce crisis, and we all know that we've got challenges in that. One of the things that we probably should factor in as well, and this is absolutely where the Gen AI piece starts to come in, the way that we consume knowledge. Dale, I think you mentioned the tribal knowledge walking out the door. We all know those engineers that, like, I had somebody come and fix my oven just before Christmas last year. And they just listened to it and knew what was broken without taking it out. It's like, that's witchcraft as far as I'm concerned. That's the kind of tribal knowledge we're losing. But that's where you get from just building stacking upon stacking of reading that 5,000-page manual and learning every single piece of that. Whereas now, that's not how we transmit, and that's not how we absorb knowledge. And so when we look at the new generation coming in, we dial the knowledge in. We get the little piece we want, and that's how we're absorbing knowledge. So that's important to factor in as we start thinking about what the agents, the customer agents in the call center or in the field start thinking about. Sorry, just a brief aside.
No, it's very, very valid. I mean, I know the younger workforce are digitally savvy. They love this. I've got a couple of millennials that I own, and they address every problem by looking straight away at their device. That's the first thing they do. But I would say, from a manufacturer's point of view, are there some concerns or some things to think about? I mean, I've heard a lot about guardrails and things. I mean, Sean, you sort of, what do you hear? Are there any sort of concerns for manufacturers to adopt this sort of technology?
Jan picked up a couple of who's going to warrant the information in here, and I'll actually go back. It's kind of no different to what the service technicians talking to each other, because in general, most of the manuals are rubbish. I've been taking things apart, and I use Gen AI and I use other tools to actually help me understand what people have written in the manuals, because I don't understand it. And but they might do something wrong, and I think we need to mature, and that's going to take us time, because that's how we're working, and this should be able to help us get better. But it really requires an organization level of maturity in terms of ongoing learning. But I think it's kind of easier when you take the person out of the loop. There's no finger pointing. It's a little bit cold and heartless. We messed up on this, it cost us this, now how do we stop it again? It's happened 4 times, blah blah blah. It makes life much easier, I think.
Dale, what are you seeing? Because I know that you've struggled with this from the technology. How do you put the guardrails in? What's the best practice really of ensuring that SOP is followed, that the guidance, the advice is accurate for that piece of equipment?
That's it's interesting. I mean, we've been doing this now for a while. So we actually started working on this problem before Gen AI popped out. And so that's one of the reasons we've been able to get into 4,500 different facilities. I mean, we already operate a very large scale expertise distribution network. And there's really kind of a few different aspects of it that we find critical. So one, and what makes this different than just using ChatGPT, in the wild, right, just off my browser, is when I'm in an industrial environment, I have some things that really matter. I'm looking at something that I need to work on. I'm going to turn a screwdriver on that thing, right? And that thing has an operational history. It has specialty configuration in a lot of cases. Sometimes it's specialty built. And the know-how for that, is very specific to what it's doing in that facility as well. So you really need to start by understanding that expertise is not general, it's personal. So, to me, accuracy starts with personalization. So you have to understand the concept of how this will be deployed. So that's number one. Number two is, it kind of comes to authority. What's the best source for the know-how of this? Is it Bob down the hall here that started work last week? Or is it a company that made it with 50 years of experience making that machine and deploying it across the globe and getting all the feedback associated with it? So to me, that authority is an important element of the story. Who's best enabled to deliver that expertise? The next piece of that, so let's assume that it's the guy that made it. That's maybe the best piece to deliver the expertise. The next piece is give them the tools to do it right, like it's a product, right? It may be a service product ultimately that is provided, but it is a product. It needs to go through a QA cycle. It needs to kind of embody their knowledge in multiple forms. I like to say there's what is known and what is written, and you need both, right?
Yeah.
And our CTO always said, well, hell, if it was all written down, there wouldn't be a support organization, right? So clearly it's not all written down. So, one of the ways that we deal with that is we have a bunch of different strategies for kind of pulling expertise out of different types of buckets. So documents, one way, like support tickets or field service tickets, that's another source of information. Service bulletins, what people know as they're doing things, and even things like standard operating procedures, things that you want people to do a certain way. And then, to kind of, directly answer Mark's question, we enforce through the AI, when someone asks a question that touches an SOP, we make them go through an SOP. So we don't necessarily answer it. We actually say, you need to go do this, and here's the step-by-step guide to do it. And that guide is actually curated by the supplier, with all the proper safety protocols and everything. So that is, kind of the opposite of generative AI. But, if someone's arm could fall off if they do it wrong, it's worth it, right? So you really have to mix all of these things together. And ultimately, the promise is that if you can bring all those sources together in, a facility, so that a facility can subscribe and use and do it with trust and do it with confidence, which is kind of, again, the shameless plug for the OCA, what the OCA is about, then maybe we can start to solve some of those challenges that you guys have been, so appropriately bringing up.
That's really helpful. Do you think the demand for servitization is going to accelerate the need for use of AI and copilots, particularly in supporting the end customer in terms of the end process engineers, operators?
Can I throw 2 cents in on that one and then let the other guys react to it?
Yeah.
Because I think they actually are more experts in servitization than I. The thing that, excites me about this is I don't look at it as a replacement for people. I mean, you still need people to turn a screwdriver, right? I see it as a whole new form of resource, a new resource class for all of these companies today that deliver services largely powered by humans. So they're making money off of human labor, and therefore their growth is limited by the humans they have. These AI copilots are a new form of expertise delivery. And I look at it and say that it opens up the landscape to deliver a whole new range of services that I could never deliver before. And can form help me, create a bridge of intimacy with my customers where I know about my entire base more closely. And I forgot which one of you guys had mentioned that whole idea of analytics and insight, and it's kind of like a bi-directional relationship. To me, I think it's the real vehicle for driving servitization, and I'd be interested to, see what you guys think. Do you see this as kind of an avenue that really explodes the whole concept of servitization and makes these OEMs? I mean, it's a recurring revenue stream with very little costs. Does it turn them into superstars?
Are they ready for AI technicians? What do you think? New class of technician?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in mainly because if I don't speak before Sean will say everything that I know, because most of what I know about servitization I learned from him and people like Jan and others. So I'm going to speak first, just that way I've got myself covered. I think it's a really good question and a really good point you raised, Dale. And it was actually, as you were going through that, my brain was starting to process this anyway. And your original question, Mark, was, will the drive towards servitization push the drive to more adoption of AI? And I think it's the other way around, which is what Dale was kind of alluding to there as well. Let's not forget the poster child. You can't say servitization without mentioning Rolls-Royce at least once in a conversation. That was, 1967? They were doing telematics in the air before we had word for telematics. So you don't need all these wonderful technologies. You don't need IoT. You don't need AI. You don't need any of that to do servitization. All right, it's been done for a long time. But all of these things, digital twins, IoT data feeds, AI to sit on top of that, predictive AI, Gen AI it just makes it so much more attainable to get towards those different layers of service offerings. And I've been pushing the thought for the last couple of years that, this model that we always see of the step pyramid towards servitization and outcome-based services at the top is wrong. It's a spectrum, and we still need to be thinking about break fix, because some people still want that. But as the technology allows us to move along, all we're doing is opening up how much of that spectrum we can access. So that would be my 2 cents, and I'm glad I said it before Sean.
Yeah.
Can I go second then? As Chris is,
yeah, then Jan.
To say after what Chris has just said. Really. I actually like Chris saying it's a spectrum, because I don't believe that advanced services for everybody in every situation is the right approach. X as a service or outcome based doesn't fit certain markets for whatever reason. It doesn't matter. What I think is common in all those markets is I want service excellence in my delivery and execution. And interestingly, I think some of these AI tools are really good at doing some of the things that service firms are historically bad at. We ran it was a planning tool for looking at buildings. And what do you do for the utility space? That's a pain. That's a waste as far as I'm concerned, because utility space I can't rent out, which hurts, okay? But without cables and lights in the building, you can't work, so you need them. And this was a discussion between the architect, the builder, and the people that were going to rent it. How much is it going to cost? How much space do we want? And this would take several weeks, because they had to go back to CAD and redraw it by hand. Using AI, we were able to turn that into a day's work. Here you go. Here's the new solution. Is that okay? What do you think? And it allowed iterative working. But interestingly, it put us in more control. And we could see the options and get to a viable solution quicker. And with equal understanding around the table.
Jan, what's your thought then? So are we looking at servitization acceleration, or is it the other way around?
I think this is a very risky question, and also to see it that way, that these are so linked. So first of all, AI is just a tool. It's a tool for a person. It can be a tool to do next level automation, that we can reduce the dependency on people for certain tasks. And it can also be a tool to have a different channel with your customers in terms of service delivery or communication. Servitization, advanced services, outcome-based services are in essence a value proposition. So that's a problem to a customer solution. We see some contradicting trends, by the way. So on the one hand, it can open up, enable us to do better jobs in providing other solutions where we help reducing waste or reducing energy consumption or improve workflows. That would be some kind of outcome-based service, although outcome-based service often suggests that we solve the problems for our customers and that we get a performance fee because we solve the whole problem. But on the other hand, we also try to do more remotely, which basically means it's a supported self-service. Yep. So we enable customers to do it themselves because it's way more easy to do it themselves. They don't need very skilled people. They don't need a lot of people. But that's another way. That's more, we're kind of enabling customers to do it themselves, and we don't have to do it. I think we are very early in these developments, and it's hard to predict how this is going to unpack in the different industries. And as Sean says, one industry is different than the other industry. They have other customer needs and what have you. But it can potentially, on the long run, really shift the kind of business model. Now it is field service based. We need people with screwdrivers on equipment. It could be that service becomes more a knowledge and information business where we educate, we provide insights. That's a completely different business model. It will have an impact on jobs. On macro level, I think we will only have more jobs because that always happens with these major trends. But that doesn't mean that jobs disappear. They will disappear, but other jobs will emerge. And that is not easy to manage because we have to develop those skills. And on an individual level, some people will find it difficult to make that shift. So it is going to have a big impact on let's say, job and people and security levels on let's say, the more micro level for certain roles. So those are all things. It's hard to predict. It's hard to understand now. But in the meantime, we have to keep on moving and exploring and making sure we are there if things start accelerating, because you don't want to fall behind. Huh?
Yeah. I know from visiting sort of quite a large, filling plant. They're basically it's a bottling and filling plant with palletizers and what have you. Lots of different manufacturers, and I know the operatives. I actually know the process engineer very well, and he was saying, I just want to get one single view of my entire operational process. So I want all my manufacturers to share that knowledge, expertise, and to provide that single source. I think potentially, if we're going to predict the future, that's probably the way it's going to go. I mean, Dale, what's your thought on sort of evolution and how these things are going to evolve?
Well, you're kind of down to the raison d'etre of, again, the whole thing around the Open Copilot Association. Each company has its expertise in its own domain. If I'm buying from vendor A, I don't expect them to be an expert in vendor C's machines. So, ultimately, what I want is I want a way in which I can subscribe to the expertise of the appropriate authoritative source for the thing that I require it for. And then, I want my workers to access it in a common UI so that it looks like it's just coming from one place. And even more, I want to be able to add my own special sauce to it, as a facility. I mean, process matters, and the use of, these machines and, the equipment and other things in that process matters. So, we kind of view that network as being a critical element of it. So, when you look at servitization as an atomic thing for an individual company, I think it's super impactful because it's a new way of delivering value. At the end of the day, it really is a new way. Now, we can debate what that value will be and what its impact will be, but most of the companies that have adopted my company's products, their philosophy is, I want to cut down time and distance. I want to empower my customers to do the things they should do, and I want to be available for the things that they need me to do. And if we're working on an outcome, let's do it together, right? So that we can maximize it. And so in any case, I think when you start now doing that over, a whole domain of things, a whole domain of suppliers, we have sites with 500 suppliers. How are they going to leverage the expertise from 500 suppliers? Are they going to have to do it themselves? And if they have to do it themselves, then the 10,000 sites that use that same supplier has to do it 10,000 times. I mean, these things don't make sense at scale unless there's a way for it to be distributed effectively. And again, with industrial grade security, accuracy, and all of the other things that we've already mentioned today. So that's what we see, and that's what we're working toward. We think that that's the way that it needs to play in the future for it to really adopt.
So by the way, if you talk about generative AI more in general, we now focus on let's say technical know-how, knowledge, and how can you deliver that to your customers. But as services has become more and more strategic business line and a growth engine, we have to look at the multidisciplinary, the different functions in a business. That's not just knowledge delivery or service delivery, it's also marketing and sales. Those jobs are also going to be massively changed by AI, generative AI. It is developing customer insights, not just for your marketing sales function, but also for your innovation function. That's going to change. The innovation itself can, so the innovation teams can use and leverage AI. So in that sense, I think it's good to, as a service leader, to see the broader picture of, hey, but how can we use generative AI and other forms of AI in other functions as well? A lot of things are changing and developing. Somebody just mentioned also how personalization can be brought to a way other level than we used to do in service delivery, but also in marketing and in sales. So a lot to unpack over there.
And obviously, we've all seen the sort of the Friday late night process engineer can't get hold of anybody that wants that guidance, that expertise across multiple machines, multiple equipment providers, that wants to have that safety and the ability for us then to look back from an audit point of view, say, well, what actually happened? What did you do? So I think that sort of that lone worker, that safety provision, I think is also sort of a byproduct, but actually in a litigious world is quite an essential sort of feature. That was a very insightful conversation, gentlemen. We're sort of times against us, but I think this is the opportunity to say thank you very much for your insights. We're going to open it up now on the broadcast to a live Q&A and really ask the audience to raise their questions, of which we'll respond to them. And thank you on behalf of the OCA for your contributions. Thank you very much, Jan, Dale, Sean, Chris. Thank you.
Very well.
Thank you very much. I can ask you all to put your audio on and your cameras on. We'll continue the conversation. That was very thought-provoking, wasn't it? We've got quite a selection of questions that Ben's been putting forward into my feed here. So I'm going to start progressing through those. I think that bit, Chris, about predicting the future, I'm going to come back to you on that in a second. But let's go with the first question. So the first question from, let's see, Prakesh. How does an OEM go about converting expertise into an AI copilot? So Dale, do you want to give that one a go? What's really, I think it was Sean that mentioned about warranting data, process approach, authentic. And I think Prakesh's question really was about, okay, so I hear what you guys are saying. So what's actually going to take for me to get a copilot operational in my business?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's three forms of expertise. Talked before. There's things that have been documented, product manuals, and there's product manuals of all shapes and sizes. And we have some companies with 20 plus product manual types, for individual products. So, sometimes what's been documented is quite extensive. There is the things that people know, and then there are the things that are contained in systems. So it's really a combination of the three things that you really want to be able to tap into. And depending on the size of the organization, the strategies for tapping into those things can be somewhat different. A company with a few products, you can do it manually. A company with many products, over 100 or above, you really need to automate that exercise. But ultimately, what we end up doing is we ingest, first of all the product manuals for, we break things down by product lines. And, these product lines and these manuals kind of, need to be identified as to what they belong with, what models they belong with, what different types of things what configuration options. And we have a way of doing that in a good way. The second thing is what people know. One of the best sources of what people know, we call basically, the support and service tickets that people have done over time. So if you've worked on something and you have decent notes associated with what you've worked on, that is a proxy for what's in someone's head. And so we ingest that as well. Now, you can't take that stuff raw because it's sometimes in different languages. Sometimes it's not well written. Surprisingly, it's not the focus of someone who fixes things to write things for marketing consumption. But ultimately, you can go through a process where things are sanitized, cleaned, compressed, or grouped. We like to call them clustering, and then ultimately they become a source of expertise that's available for the copilots. And then the final thing is, what systems are useful, and almost always there's a part system around that's quite useful. But there's many others as well. We've integrated with IoT systems so that people can gain, insight to actual operations from a copilot. There's many different types of systems that add value. But those are the three kind of primary dimensions, and that's really where you'll pull the expertise with a copilot. One little tidbit I'm going to throw in here. A lot of those sources are proprietary. So most of our customers don't publish like their service manuals, or they don't publish, open access to their parts database or something of that nature. And so these copilots act as a bridge between private sources and, people. And but while maintaining the privacy of those sources. Also, when you pull that information together, you need to know who you want to have access to it. Is it an employee only, or is it employees and distributors, or employees, distributors, and customers? There's a mixture of that. But the thing to keep in mind is you do want it grounded. So you want it coming from authorized sources. You want it to be, comprehensive to the types of things that you're working on. And as I'd mentioned in the webinar, you want it to be personalized. So those are really the elements that go into pulling something like this together. It's non-trivial, but, companies like ours, we endeavor to make it easy.
Yeah. Anyone else like to add on that particular question, on that particular topic?
Yeah, maybe two things. I like what Dale just said about different kind of knowledge. I think it's good to unpack that part what is not documented or in systems. That is partly explicit knowledge, but has never been documented. So once we start learning, capturing that, we can add that to the explicit knowledge base, which is quite predictable and directly usable by a copilot kind of function. And there will also be more the real tribal knowledge, which is more tacit, is experiential, and is hard to document as a proper framework or model, because there's too much intuition in there. And in time, we will see that we are able to document and codify more of that, but not all of it. And probably it's good to kind of also keep that in mind, because problems we need to solve with that kind of intuitional tacit knowledge will always be human work. So that was one thought that came to mind. How they go about, if that means what are OEMs doing at this moment. What I see the majority doing at this moment is focusing on, let's say, high volume, low risk and low complexity calls. Start working that first to provide a kind of co-pilot function to your own service staff, either on the phone or remote or on site with the engineers, and start seeing how they work. And then, by the way, we see that leads to productivity improvement, but it's also learning the system and gradually expanding, going to more complex stuff. And once we are secure that it's reliable, predictable, and also that it meets any kind of quality and compliance regulations, which is particularly important in regulated industries, then maybe start opening it to customers. Then probably starting with things that are in the manuals, whether they're good or bad manuals, sure, but that's what customers already have at hand, but then providing a tool to better navigate to information. And then at some point start also using that Copilot function for customers for things that are not already information that is readily available for customers, but because that is in other systems and documents and what have you. So that is a kind of approach I see with most of the OEMs, but also basically it means we are very, very early steps in actually finding good use cases that work.
Do you think we are in early steps?
For them.
To them, yeah. And say on this, there's
Yeah.
a question here about the hurdles and some of the challenges. I mean, I'm going to ask Chris, because Chris, you came up with that statement about predicting the aging workforce. I really love that, and the skill fade. I mean, so just standing back as a commentator, coming back. No, I'm crediting you with that. Coming back with that to say, okay, so we've heard mention of AI technicians. We've heard mention. We had the Friday night story of the engineer on their own, the process engineer, can't get anybody on the phone, can't phone a friend. What do they do? So where do you think this is going? Where would you predict? I'm going to then ask Sean to comment, because I know both of you are well plugged into big communities. So is this real, growing? What do you think? What do you think is going to happen?
It's going to depend on the industry, is my first comment here, Mark. I think the first point is for certain industries, we will just see a massive shift towards self-service and transactional exchange of information being the valuable thing. Perfect example would be your internet service provider or anything technological in the home, that kind of industry. It makes sense. You pay a slight premium, whether it's a monthly subscription or whether it's just the same as you pay for any support line, and you get your generative AI will tell you, hey, just like this is your problem, troubleshoot. We've already seen iterations of that. 5-10 years ago, what my mobile provider who did my broadband, exactly that. Go on, and from the broadband, from the modem, we can go through troubleshooting. It's just going to be that on steroids. In other industries, it's going to be much, much more like Jan's describing, where it'll be kept internal. You can't afford to, but not just for the regulatory and health and safety reasons, but for financial reasons and everything else. You can't just ship that across to a client. But what it does mean, and this is something we've been seeing for forever, is it's just simple Pareto principle. 80% of the problems that come into any service desk are really easily solved. And those are the ones that will be easily sorted out by the AIs that allow new techs or badged and non-badged employees to be able to handle it. And then what we see is that consolidation of knowledge for our real experts for that 20%. The other thing I would say, sorry, really, really briefly, the one thing that I think AI, especially in the triage process, will absolutely bring forward is a democratization of the quality of service. Right now, in the era we live in, if I phone up and I speak to Mark, he might know everything there is about my Flugel Binder 4000. If I speak to Chris, he might be the idiot that got hired as a pity hire 10 minutes ago. And so the service delivery that I'm going to get is solely reliant on who picks up the phone and when my phone was routed.
Yep.
Whereas AI agents support, as a layer of support for the contact center or the tech on site, that'll democratize that. So I'll always get that 4 out of 5 rather than maybe a 5 if I was lucky enough to get Mark and a 1 if I was lucky to get Chris. That's my view.
You're very kind. Okay, and Sean, so what do you reckon? I know you're well plugged into a lot of research. What are you seeing?
I like what Chris is saying in terms of how do we democratize it so it's across the patch. Actually, I like the way he said that. It's so that we actually give a better service experience, so that if I am stuck in an aeroplane, you can get to somebody who can probably fix you, even if it's not your favorite field service engineer. And when I worked for utility, we regularly wanted to have certain service techs back again to lead the job. The issue I have there, though, is some of that was real tacit knowledge because they knew their way around the site. So that comes back to what Jan's saying of the tacit knowledge. How the heck do we get that out? I think something that we're overlooking in the use of AI is actually pointing, Chris is the expert of this. You should actually talk to him directly as the field service, and actually enabling what the field service techs do all the time with their phones and phoning their friend up and going, I don't know how to fix this. Can you help? I think that's a layer that we haven't actually really experienced or gathered a lot. And I don't know, it's I had a class and there was a group of them that assumed that the designers who wrote the manual knew what they were doing. If I ask most of the designers to take a machine apart, they have no idea how to take it apart. So there's a contradiction there.
Design for service, is that not?
Sorry?
Design for service, no?
Design for manufacture would be a good start. Yeah, sometimes it gets stuck. Design for service is something which one day we'll get to. So being able to share that knowledge around, I think, is absolutely vital. I think another way is actually levering it up and realizing that you've all been doing it slightly the wrong way, but this guy over here has actually found a better way to do it. And that's why I say it's a better way to get that job done. And I think that's another thing that we potentially lose. And what's interesting, those coming back to the people enabled through AI rather than the AI replacing them, and almost giving yourself a super apprenticeship again by having a bigger group of mentors here in the apprenticeship pool to help you get stuff done.
Yeah, no, totally. I echo all of that.
Just sorry, one thought to what Sean said there. You know what the one bit about that, and this leans in from what Jan was saying as well. The bit about the tacit knowledge, of course, we kind of just fit around it. Of course, that now becomes even more valuable within the organization, because now we can turn around and say, hey, Sean, if you want Mark to turn up because he knows the site, then there's going to be a scarcity on his demand and there's going to be a premium because of that. But if you have a problem that you just want to get fixed really quickly, then there is a second tier of service offering. And then we're starting to get those more complex conversations.
I wouldn't even argue it's a second tier. It's people don't like change, so I wouldn't even argue it's a second tier. It takes you a day to get used to the site. What's the most important things? How to get inducted? Where's the coffee? Where's the best coffee machine? Those are the usual two most important things. Sorry, Dale, you were going to say
talking about in the past, though, like you're not losing anything. Are you not gaining a new resource? Is there a new class of service? I mean, do you think at our next big service event we'll be talking about this new class of technician?
Yeah, it's me doing the job.
Hey, Mark, can I add one?
Serious, and that fits with what Chris is saying. How do we integrate me better into the job so that I actually become part of this extended service fleet?
Yeah.
The group of service technicians. I think that's a really important thing that this can help. That saves cost. It also accelerates things. So it actually increases the service quality that you're getting, and you feel part of the team. You feel loved.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the couple of little comments to throw in here. One, we're there's a challenge out there, right? We all know that there's an aging workforce event. We know that the next generation of workers stay 2 years and go. We know that, it's a different environment. So the typical kind of industrial modus operandi of crawl, walk, then maybe run is going to be difficult to execute because of the pain level. The other thing that I wanted to kind of point out is that generative AI is bidirectional. And we've only talked about it one direction today mostly. But it's a great tool also for expertise capture. And, we enable people to be able to say, oh, I fixed this problem by doing this. This is the right way to do it, blah, 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 blah. And kind of provide the expertise of some of those workers, but even more importantly, to aggregate it. So when you're dealing, like the OCA is kind of promoting, when you're dealing with a population of factories, with a population of experts, and each of those contributing to various domain knowledge, of course, going through potential curation steps to make sure that it's blessed, right? But, that provides a way to vacuum up that expertise at scale. Versus, just sending a call to someone, have them answer a question that they're annoyed getting the call for, and because it's bothering them from doing whatever they were doing. And it also bottlenecks. So I think this whole, strategy around AI of, becoming kind of a source code control for expertise within an organization and in fact, within a population of our community is really a powerful concept. And, with the challenges around the aging workforce, I think we're going to see adoption go much faster than anything we've seen before.
Yeah, I've actually been involved. I've just seen a pilot of video debrief. So the engineer actually using prompted video to debrief the task and to actually, and I've seen that video being mined, audio to text, and then the text being mined to put into an LLM. So very interesting. Yeah, totally agree. Yeah. Well, I think, gentlemen, we are coming up to the hour. In fact, we're just on the hour. So it's been a fascinating conversation. That's the first. So thank you very much on behalf of the OCA for doing our very first session. I've learned a lot. And I think we're at the forefront, I believe, of quite a very interesting new change in our industry. So many thanks, Jan, Chris, Sean, Dale. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the audience. I trust you found this very helpful and insightful. There's lots more information on the OCA website about getting started, about joining, lots of assets and resources and materials. Our next episode will be monetizing AI copilots, and this will be broadcast very soon. You can register for this event on the OCA website. We'll also send out some emails to follow up. So thank you, guys. Thank you very much for your contribution. Been an absolute pleasure. And I wish everybody a very enjoyable rest of the day.